This is TWiT.
And joining us for the first interview of the day is Will Oremus of the Washington Post, here to talk about prebunking, an interesting word that I can't wait to get into. Welcome back to the show, Will.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's start at the top here. Can you explain the concept of prebunking and how it kind of differs from traditional methods of combating election, well, just misinformation in general, but in particular, in this case, election misinformation?
Yeah, so prebunking is obviously a play on debunking, which is when somebody says something that's not true and you come in and show that it's not true and tell people what the truth really is. The problem with debunking when it comes to misinformation in an election is that with social media and the speed at which claims can spread virally online, by the time fact checkers get around to debunking something that's false, most of the people who were going to see it already saw it. And to some extent, the damage is done. I mean, some people might see the debunk and go, oh, that thing wasn't true after all. But I think, most of us can probably count on one hand the number of times that we've ever, gone back and seen something after the fact that changed our mind. So the idea is to somehow get ahead of misinformation by kind of doing the debunking ahead of time. This requires anticipating what the false claims are going to be, and then preparing people and voters specifically in this case to evaluate those claims and to sort of see through them when they first encounter them in the wild.
That, I have to say, that aspect of it, of guessing what people are going to come up with, it has to be the most difficult part of prebunking in the first place. And it seems like in many cases, folks are tackling the easier, kind of more predictable aspects of this rather than, oh, I saw candidate number one catch a rat and feed it to a cat that then he sold to China or something. Like there could be some wild things that people put together, and I can't imagine trying to come up with what goes on there. But I was hoping you could provide some specific examples of prebunking campaigns that have actually been implemented globally. I know Google has worked on some in the European Union.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, and especially with generative AI, just to pick up on something you said, you can make it look like anything happened now, right? Like, I don't know, something about a rat and a cat, but you could just put that into, Mid-Journey or whatever, and it would spit it out and you could circulate that on social media. But yeah, in fact, a lot of the claims are somewhat predictable. This is what our sources say. I mean, it's not hard to guess that there will be claims of mail-in voter fraud. It's not hard to guess that whenever elections come around, there'll be claims that, that your party's ballots are getting thrown in the garbage and we have footage of it, or that, that the voting machines are rigged, or that sort of thing. So some of them really are predictable. And those are the ones that some of the state and local election officials are trying to get ahead of. One way that some states are doing this is they're actually holding videos where they show their election workers, meet the people who count the ballots, see how we do it. We'll show you these are real people. These are your neighbors counting the ballots. This is not, these are not the Illuminati, in a closet, cooking up the election results. And then it's also been, you mentioned Google. So Google's Jigsaw division, which is ideas skunkworks thing where they try to come up with sort of tech-related ideas to improve the world in various ways. I'll say they've had sort of mixed success with that in the past, but they've gotten interested in this prebunking idea. And in the European Union, they're putting out videos that are really they're not so much about anticipating a specific false claim. They're more about sort of educating people how to spot fishy claims in general. So there's this cartoon video about scapegoating and about how if you see somebody trying to blame a group of people, particularly if it's a marginalized group, for some big societal problem, they're probably trying to sell you a line. That's something that you should be suspicious of. They have it with a few other just common rhetorical techniques. And so the idea is that if you see the rhetorical technique, then no matter what the specific claim is, you'll recognize, oh, these people are, this is an example of scapegoating. I should check this out before believing that, the Roma people were being brought in caravans to all vote for the candidate I don't like or whatever.
Right. Absolutely. And I found it interesting in your piece, you talk about how Google, while doing these kind of little videos talking about these different techniques in the European Union, the company has, at least as it stands, decided not to launch a pre-bunking campaign here in the United States. And so I was curious why that's the case. And to find out the answer later in your piece was really interesting. And it wasn't something that I had thought of off the top of my head. But then also, because Google is not doing that, you did kind of talk about some alternative approaches that are being taken. Maybe you could talk a little bit about how local celebrities, so to speak, are also being asked to get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I should take a moment to say that this is a story that I co-authored. My colleague Kat Zakreski was the lead author on the piece. She's our tech policy reporter, and she's fantastic. So Google has not done it in the U.S., and they're not saying exactly why, but you can kind of guess it, right? I mean, there's been a big concern from the right, particularly Republican leaders in Congress, that this whole idea of content moderation, of debunking misinformation, is really this sort of liberal conspiracy to suppress conservatives or to keep Donald Trump out of office. And they've been very suspicious of it. And anytime a tech company gets involved these days in a controversial content moderation decision, they're likely to get hauled in front of Jim Jordan's weaponization of government committee in the House, and grilled by Republicans especially about why did you do this, and is this a conspiracy? Are you censoring the American voters? So in the United States, the tech companies have become quite shy about doing this kind of thing. And I should say that, I mean, if you're a tech giant, I mean, I think that there's probably some frustration on their part, but also like they don't love being in this business in the first place, right? Like they didn't start, Facebook or Google in order to be the arbiters of truth. They wanted to like make a platform that a ton of people use and make a ton of money at it, right? Like they don't like being they don't like being the political football. So I think they also were willing, they I don't know about happy, but like they were willing to take a step back and say, fine, look, we're going to do less of this here in the United States because it just gets us in trouble. But yes, the state officials have taken up the mantle. There was an example in Arizona's Maricopa County where election officials were bringing in members of the Phoenix Suns basketball team to help explain how voting works and how the polling stations work. So that's the idea of getting ahead of election misinformation is mostly in the U.S. happening at the state and local level, even as it happens at the national level elsewhere in the world.
Understood. Now, you mentioned this briefly. We kind of both talked about it a little bit, but it's interesting that pre-bunking is at the forefront right now, given what we've seen in terms of trying to combat misinformation and disinformation for the past, 10 years. What do you think that generative AI has played a role in the sort of arguable acceleration in trying out new things? Or was this destined to happen given the proven election interference we've had in the past and how trying to correct afterward simply showed that it did not work?
Yeah, and that's a very fair question. A lot of these efforts, the pre-bunking idea predates the current wave of generative AI, but it is true that there are a lot of concerns about how generative AI could influence U.S. elections, how it's already potentially influencing elections abroad. My colleague Pranshu Verma and I wrote a story last year about how voice fakes, where you make it sound like a politician said something they didn't. You use generative AI audio. In the Moldovan election, they were made to make it seem like a candidate had been conspiring with a reporter to cover up the truth about stealing the election. And we don't know how many people that convinced, but it certainly it certainly got shared quite a bit. So that is a real concern. But when I talk to the people who study this for a living, they say that it's not that it's a distraction, but you sort of can't take your eye off the ball that social media is still the way that people find out this stuff, right? Social media is still where the claims spread, whether they're created with generative AI or whether that's just somebody, making up something false and writing a text post or Photoshop or whatever. The place where the action is on social media. It's in whether social media moderates it, whether they apply fact-checking labels, how widely their algorithms distribute it. And by the way, I think that's a really underrated factor here. I mean, you hear a lot of controversy about social platforms deciding what posts to take up, to leave up, what posts to take down. Mm-hmm. But part of the root of the issue is really that these engagement-based social networks were designed to make sort of the most sensational claims go viral, right? And so a lot of the most sensational claims turn out not to be the most true or the most balanced claims. And so I think that's sort of an underrated part of what the underlying issue is here.
Yeah, in the piece, you all link to a game that maybe some folks have played that shows kind of misinformation, disinformation gamified for the purpose of getting clicks and kind of gaining sort of overall celebrity and the role that plays. And it was a really interesting kind of click through game that I played after I read your piece. And, this is the thing when it comes to those of us who write about this stuff regularly, talk about this stuff regularly, pay a lot of attention to this stuff regularly. I think many of us do have a built-in skepticism when it comes to all of this. I know, for me, it's very rare that I ever read something and say, oh, I believe that wholeheartedly, and it gets into my brain, and then I pass it along as fact to other people, because I just kind of automatically assume everything is a lie until proven otherwise. But that's kind of what this prebunking is about, in the sense that it's hopefully going to introduce that curiosity and skepticism, and more importantly, a filter that exists between the stuff that's out there. But it's very clever the way that people use emotion to sway people's opinions or to bypass any filter that they have. And so I was kind of curious, what evidence is there as to the effectiveness of prebunking? And then are there critics who say, I don't think prebunking is going to do much of anything at all?
Yeah. There's a lot there. That game is kind of fun. I would urge people to try it out if they want. It's called Bad News, and it actually puts you in the role of the propagandist, the person who's trying to spread misinformation, and you have to you have to hire bots to spread your falsehoods on social media, and you can choose sort of which false claim to push on a given day, and how to tap into people's emotions or biases or bigotry. I do think most people are pretty good at being skeptical of information that goes against their beliefs, right? When we see something that we're disinclined to agree with, we tend to treat that very skeptically. When we see stuff that reinforces what we already believe, we tend to be very credulous about that. And you'll even hear people who share, what's later deemed to be misinformation. They don't actually really care that much if it's true. They're like, oh, I just thought it was funny, right? Like, I just thought, okay, maybe Biden didn't do this dumb thing, but we know he's an idiot. So who cares if this particular thing wasn't true? And so I think understanding the motivations for why people share misinformation is valuable. And yes, there are some critics of this idea of prebunking. It's not that they say that we shouldn't be trying to educate people about how to spot false claims, but the criticism is more that look, you're trying to teach digital literacy, and this is like a whole field of study, right? This is like years of schooling to really become an expert at sifting through truth and falsehood in communications, in marketing, online, on social media, and you're trying to do this with a cute 30-second cartoon video, right? Yes, educating people to be more literate about what they see online is really valuable, but the skepticism is are these little prebunking campaigns actually going to have any effect? And some of the critics in the field say, all right, debunking may have its shortcomings, but at least there is solid evidence that when people see a debunking, it moves the needle a little bit. There's evidence for that. And we don't yet have much empirical evidence that these types of sort of short, quick prebunking campaigns have a significant impact on voter behavior. But maybe we'll find out this cycle.
Let's hope, because honestly, it gets a little disheartening at times to hear the, even though in that case, folks are not saying don't do this, but they're saying kind of good luck. This takes it's like, there's got to be something we can do, at least something's happening. At least somebody's trying something, and hopefully we can continue to try something and see if anything possibly works, because by golly, it feels a little bleak out there at times. I want to thank you and your co-authors so much for taking the time to put together this piece. Everybody should head over to the Washington Post at washingtonpost.com to check it out. Of course, folks can head there to keep up with what you're doing. But is there anywhere else they should go to follow along with what you've got going on?
They can subscribe to our Tech Brief newsletter. It used to be called the Tech 202. We just changed the name to the Tech Brief. It's 3 days a week, and it covers tech issues from a sort of policy lens. It's not all politics and policy, but it's analysis of stuff in the news in tech that has implications for policy and society. I co-write that with Cristiano Lima, who's also on our team. And you don't have to be a Washington Post subscriber to sign up for the Tech Brief. So if you're interested, go for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for your great questions.
Thanks so much for watching this little chunk of Tech News Weekly. If you'd like to get the full episode, well, head over to twit.tv/TNW. There you'll find buttons you can click or tap to subscribe to the entire show in audio and video formats. Or just look in the description. We've got links down there as well.